Home is life. Home is the place in which we do life, right? My name is MK. Thank you. Welcome to the Quilt Podcast. First and foremost, before we start anything, right, as we are embarking on this conversation around home, right, let's first make time to acknowledge the home of, or the first peoples and the nations who called this land's home since long before any of us, many of us have settled here. I'm so sorry. Let's breathe real quick. Breathing is when we know we are alive. Breathing is what reminds us that our body is our first home, right? So I want to acknowledge that this is the ancestral homes of many indigenous groups, right? Before colonists imposed the names America or the United States of America upon them. I mean, even the name America is named after an Italian map maker, America's Vespucci, right? It constitutes, and that very name stands to constitute an erasure of many of the indigenous names that indigenous people have used to refer to their own homelands, like the Dakota and Anishinaabe people who call the land that I am speaking on home first. We also recognize that land acknowledgement is only one first step, right? And that this first step must be followed by a commitment to learn and to follow a path that's been laid out before us by our Dakota and Ojibwe relatives, right? To return to right management of our relationships with Mother Earth, our shared home. And one concrete step that we can do to follow that, the leadership of our Dakota, Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk people is to peep game and follow something very tangible, which is the land back movement. And Gabby will drop the land back. Yes, my love, I will help in just a minute, okay? Land back, to find out more information about land back, Gabby's gonna drop some info and some links in the chat. Cirien, why don't you take it away while I help Stokely?
All right, thank you, MK. So the Quilt Podcast is a collaboration between Voices for Racial Justice, the UpTake Community News, and other Minnesota-based community partners. The Quilt Podcast fosters conversations at the intersections of public policy, community organizing, journalism, art, and healing. Season 1, and this is episode 3, seeks to understand and answer the question, what is this moment calling for us to do together? As a quick introduction, before MK gets back, my name is Cirien Saadeh, pronouns are she, her, and I am the executive director for the UpTake. I'm also a community-trained journalist and a community organizing educator, and I have a podcast on WFNU. I'm one of the original co-producers and co-founders of the Quilt Podcast, and you can learn more about the quilt at thequiltmagazine.com. So MK, you're up. MK, we can't hear you.
I was just rambling on about how, as we're talking about home, you get a whole tour about my home, right? And what happens inside of the home, cooking for children, sleeping children, multitasking, making sure that folks are loved and taken care of. So who am I? My name is MK Nguyen. I first want to just say Chào cả nhà. I love saying Chào cả nhà, and Tram knows what I'm talking about, and I love that Tram knows what I'm talking about. Chào cả nhà, literally, it's a way to say hello in our culture, Viet people, and it literally translates into welcome or hello, greetings to all that is home, right? So I am a mama who is trying to survive racial monopoly capitalism. And I follow young people. So right now on my lunch break, I I'm actually doing this on my lunch break. I am somebody who's in the Social Studies Standards Committee. I took on this role under the leadership of young people from the Ethnic Studies Coalition and Youth for Ethnic Studies Coalition to serve as this community member so that we can shape, right? We have people who are in that space shaping what our young people will learn, what our standards will be, right? To which our young people learn for the next 10 years. And so after this call, if you are craving some lunch dessert, right, and a treat, come over and join me and witness the afternoon portion of the Social Studies Standards Review process. So in the Social Studies Standards space, we are actually looking at this idea. Economy, is showing up a lot in our conversations, right? And because I think at this point in time, there's a lot of there's a tension, right? Where that we're holding around, like, what is economy, right? And folks are really scared, right? That this Western way of looking, right? This idea of economy, right, that has been in existence for at least 168 years of Minnesota's existence, right, is going to be jeopardized, right? And if we look at what exactly, is this meaning of home, we can draw back to the word, right, and where the word came from, oikos, eco, right? Eco means home, right? Economy, it is the management of home. So what is home, right? Home is a place to breathe. Home is a place to break bread. Home is a place to lay our heads. Home is a place to create, reflect, and regenerate. Home is beyond the bricks and mortar. Home is sacred. It's what everyone deserves. A base for success, a foundation for growth, a stepping stone, a place for children to play and where they give the best hugs at the end of the day. Home is care, comfort, warmth, love, and nurturing. Home is belonging and acceptance. Home is a peace of mind. Home is safety, security, and stability, the right to thrive and build wealth for our families. Home is where we mend our wounds, our freedom from pain, or our freedom to move through pain at our own terms, to heal and repair from harm. Home is where we spend at least 1/3 of our lives. Home is a right, and it should not be seen as a commodity, right? So as our social studies folks, right, are shaping the discourse around, like, what is home and what is relationship to home and how do we manage our relationship, you know what I mean, with each other and with our home, right? We today, right, are interrogating and struggling through, right, and really looking at and reflecting, you know what I mean, on this question ourselves, right, around what is home, right, and who has the right, you know what I mean, to shape what our economy looks like, right? And so, and I also want to just say thank you. What I just read was a poem, a cross-pollination of housing advocates who've gathered and conjured up this poem on March of 2019, a couple of years ago. And among them were some elders in my neighborhood, the people I do life with, Elder Jolene Mason and Elder Pamela James, right? I want to put their names into the room, and also shout out, to Caitlin Magistad for holding space for us to come together. So what's on my heart right now around what it means to have a home, to have a culture, or how we see this concept of home. Like, my hope is that inside of this conversation and many other conversations that we know we will have, right, as St. Paul is on its way to advancing rent stabilization, right, is that it should, you know, where the culture that we're really trying to promote and that we will be promoting is that culture that it shouldn't even be debatable, right? That every living being on this planet deserves a home, right? And the demand for rent stabilization, right, should be seen as like a bare minimum, right, to that value. And that this is where we jump off of and start from, and that we don't go backwards, right? And this is, so if you ain't there yet, you know what I mean? Use this podcast as a space to learn, right? And if you ain't there yet, then, you know, you can go and do what you need to do and then come back to us, right? But this is where we're going to be. So I'm going to pass it off to Cirien. What you got for me?
All right. Thank you, MK. So today, what we're tapping into, we're going to be having a conversation to learn more about the Keep St. Paul Home campaign on rent stabilization. We're going to be joined by key organizers that have been involved in this effort. But before we get started, here's some context. In St. Paul, as of a 2016 report from the Minnesota Housing Partnership, St. Paul was home to over 5,600 renter households, which was more than half the total number of households within St. Paul. 41% of those renters were made up of white households. The remaining 59 were made up of BIPOC communities. So 83% of Black households were renters. 67% of Indigenous households were renters. 62% of Asian households were renters, as well as 66% of Latino households. Additionally, St. Paul Public Schools has reported that over 2,000 students and their families have no home in which to do homework. One solution that we want to spotlight from the constellation of ideas that are gaining traction in our communities is rent stabilization. We know that with COVID and in this moment, that rent stabilization is absolutely crucial. We know that the prominence and importance of this issue now, especially as people have faced and continue to face the loss of loved ones, the loss of work, the loss of wages and tip loss due to racism and xenophobia, as well as this ever-changing and deepening and growing housing and renters market, makes this topic of rent stabilization so crucial. I'm going to pass it back on to MK to continue framing today's discussion. MK, we can't hear you again.
And you know what? Like, I'm not going to apologize, but I will acknowledge that there is so much going on in this house. There's so much going on in our world, and our home is not exempt from that. And so right now I am juggling children, and that's it. So I think if it's okay with you, one breath together before we rock and roll, okay? Let's remind each other that we are alive, all right? And I'm really bad on the count, so I'm just gonna allow you to breathe on your own, okay? So 3 breaths, y'all. 1. So thank you for pushing for expansiveness with me. And thank you for reclaiming our time by reclaiming our breath with me. So let's get cracking on the first question. I want to know who are all of these gorgeous people in this room right now, okay? So what I want y'all to do is I want you to introduce yourself, right? I'm so excited that you are here. You are, as I'm holding down mama space, education space, I really look to you all, right? To pay deep attention to the housing justice space. And I follow you, right? And so I can't wait for you to share more about yourself, right? And give opportunity for others to fall in love with you as well and to follow you after this call. So tell me, who are you? Where is the land in which you do life at? And also, what is one thing that you don't want to ever hear, right, about rent stabilization ever again? And I'm gonna scan the faces, and Brian's looking at me, so I'm gonna throw it to you first.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me and having us. Honestly, it's really an honor to be on this podcast and talking about such an important issue. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Rosas. I use they and he pronouns, and I am with the Minnesota Youth Collective, a nonprofit organization that is doing a lot of cool work in engaging young people in our political spaces so that they can one day lead and showing them the leadership that they already have within them. And I am currently in St. Paul, around the Marion Park neighborhood. So that is where I do life. And something that I never really want to hear about rent stabilization again, obviously, is going to be the misconceptions around it. One of them being that they do not serve our community. It does the complete opposite. It makes sure that our community members stay our community members, not just for a year or two, but for generations to come. And that is why I'm super passionate about this. So that's my story. And I will popcorn it to Danielle.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Swift. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm with the Frogtown Neighborhood Organization. I'm the anti-displacement community organizer there. So I do life in Frogtown, but I also do life on the East Side and other neighborhoods throughout the city of St. Paul. Very happy to be here today. And I think what I don't want to hear about rent stabilization at all is the fear that people have behind it. I think that we can operate from a place of fear, or we can operate from a place of faith. And I don't think that we can do both of those things at the same time. So I don't want to hear anything about fear. We're going into this bold with courage and love. And when we do that, we can accomplish great things. So, and I'm going to go ahead and popcorn to Tram.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with Jamila, Danielle, and Brian, just our kick-ass team at HENS. My name's Tram Hoang, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I do life in St. Paul, currently in St. Anthony Park. And I'm actually in the middle of transitioning between life in St. Paul and life in Minneapolis, which makes me sad because I love St. Paul. But I think that, gosh, there's so many things that I don't ever want to hear again about rent stabilization. But I think the main thing is, and we see this sometimes when we collect signatures, is when people say, oh, I'm not a renter, it doesn't impact me. Like, I wish I could help, but it doesn't impact me. And that's so not true, right? Let's say you're a homeowner who wants a stable community, who wants your neighbors and friends to live in your community, then this does impact you. Also, I'm transitioning to becoming a homeowner right now. And I know for a fact that I have rent control as a homeowner. I have rent control for 30 years. I know what my mortgage and home payment is going to be for 30 years. So as a homeowner, I have rent control, and I want that for everyone in the city. So I think, I don't want to hear that it doesn't impact you, because it impacts everyone. It impacts the small business owners who, cannot keep their staff on board because their staff can't afford to live in the city anymore. It affects our faith communities, because we see communities getting displaced and our sense of stability and togetherness gets disrupted. So I think, I don't want to hear people say it doesn't impact them, because we have to expand our understanding of what home is. It's not just who's in your house, it's who's in your community, who's in your city. And I will popcorn to Jamila.
Thank you, Tram. Hello, everyone. And also, I just want to say, please do excuse me if you hear a lot of noise. I'm actually outside right now. Great to be in community with all of you here today. Thank you so much for the invite. My name is Jamila Mame. I use she and her. I live in St. Paul. That's where I do a lot of my work, and especially in the in the community of women of color. One thing that I don't want to hear about rent stabilization again is all the myths like Tram, Danielle, and Brian mentioned. I don't want to hear anything around it doesn't concern me, or it's not possible, or this doesn't impact me. I don't want to hear any of that, because I believe that whatever impacts me will impact everyone else. Whatever impacts my neighbor impacts me. So that's how I am going into this campaign, and I cannot wait to win it with all of you. And I will popcorn it to Luna.
I think back to you, MK.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna throw it to Cirien.
All right. Thank you all for answering that question and for each one of you speakers being here. This is a really rock star panel, so I'm super excited. As I'm a storyteller and a journalist, and I'm obsessed with this idea of story. And I often think about the stories we hear and the stories that we don't get to hear. And that often the stories we don't get to hear are concealed. And I recently heard of this acronym, denial, which was from the friend of a woman named Erica Huggins, and a denial stood for didn't even know I was lying. And I'm sort of in love with that concept. And so my question for you today, as we think about stories and we think about rent stabilization, are what are the stories of what people are going through that need to be brought to light? And I'm a teacher, so I'm just going to call on people. So why don't we just start with Danielle?
I think that's a great question. And there are a couple that pop to my mind right away. One is that a story of another person who I experienced while organizing. She was in her 80s and had lived in her home for years and years. And with the rent increase, she had to move. And when we think about our elders being on fixed incomes, experiencing their whole lives, where are you gonna go, you know? And, you know, living in communities, it really developing a village mentality of like, that's all of our grandma, right? What if our grandma had nowhere to go? And that was real, you know? And so we had to, you know, pull together and try to come up with something. But as these increases continue, we're really limited on the places that our grandmas can go. And think about the support that you need as you get into your older age, about people just checking in on you. And that's part of the important piece of keeping community intact. And the other is my own personal story in my family, where I'm working with my mom to assert her rights as a renter and pushing back on her landlord about, hey, no, you can't ask me to pay for this. That's outside of the legalities of renter tenant law. And we push back, and that feels good. And she hits us with the wild, well, your rent is raised $200 card. Good luck with that one. And it's legal. And it's frustrating because what can you do? And how do you encourage people to stand up for themselves and to exercise their rights when you know that there is something like that can come in and kind of knock them off their feet? So it's just not fair. And I'll with that, I'll pop. Should I popcorn, Cirien, or do you want to call on somebody?
Popcorn works.
Okay, I'll send it over to Brian.
Yeah, thanks for this question. I kind of wanted to share something that actually happened over the weekend on Sunday when we were collecting signatures over at Como Lake. I talked to this elderly white couple, and they were just kind of on board with everything. And I remember the older gentleman telling me, oh yeah, I remember when my rent was like $150. And then she turns to me and she goes, I remember my number one rule when finding a place to call home is that I will never spend more than $400 on rent. And I just like looked at them and was like, that sounds like such a fucking dream. And in my head, I was jealous because, you know, they were able to get that at one point. And in my head, it also reminded me, you know, this crisis didn't just come out of nowhere, right? Our housing crisis didn't just happen randomly. It had intention. It had intentions to displace. It had intentions to gentrify. It had intentions to make sure people couldn't stay in our communities for a specific reason. And when I think about stories, I think about those stories of people not telling the community what their intentions are, but instead infiltrating their neighborhoods, the place they call home. And for me, I also thought about when they told me that, it just gave me such, it made me grateful in a way, because he also turned to me and said, it's so disruptive how much young people have to pay in rent nowadays. I don't see that to be true. I don't see that to be right. And I hope that it changes with this. And I just think about my story, like having immigrant grandparents, having an immigrant dad. Like, I don't have that generational wealth that a lot of these older folks I know have, especially those who are white. And it kind of just reminded me, like, I, even myself, have some ounce of privileges, that even though I don't have that generational wealth, I do have my community. I have the group of people that I have behind me that have always supported me. Even though we all are struggling, we all find a way to support each other. And I always like to highlight those kind of stories as well, where, you know, if you feel alone, you're not really alone. You have your people and you have the folks who are going to always have your back. So when I think of stories, again, I think about those stories of intention, those stories of people who have never had the access to tell their stories. And then I think about the folks who do have some really great stories to tell around the privileges that they have. So that is kind of what I think about when I hear this question.
Brian, you can popcorn it to somebody.
I'll popcorn it to Tram.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I was at Como Lake over the weekend, and I remember hearing that story and feeling such a strong sense of solidarity from folks, right? We're asking for a signature and they share this experience with us, and it's one of the best parts of building this movement together. Let's see, a truth that exposes the lies our society tells us about rent stabilization. I think for me, one of the truths that's just never spoken enough is the history of racism in our housing system, from, you know, stolen land to intentional racialized disinvestment to blockbusting to redlining. It's just endless. And I think that truth is hidden from us so that we don't fight for racial equity in housing. I think that is such a key piece of our campaign, is fighting for racial justice in housing and fighting for racial equity in this policy specifically, because we know that the policy that we're fighting for, which is a 3% cap on rents, specifically targets Black, Indigenous, and people of color renters. And so the story that needs to be told is that there's intentional racial harm in our housing system, and we can do something about it with this policy, because we know that for most people, rents don't increase more than 3% a year. But we can't make policies based on what benefits most people, because that creates the same cracks for the same people to fall through. And those people that fall through the cracks are always us, right? It's low wealth folks, it is Black folks, it's Indigenous people, it is communities of color, immigrants, refugees. And so one of the truths that we have to tell is that there is so much intentional racial harm in our housing system, and something can be done about it with many steps, but rent stabilization and the policy that we're pushing for is just one of those steps. Like MK said at the beginning, it's a bare minimum to get us to the vision of a city that we want to live in and really love. And with that, I'll popcorn to Jamila.
Thank you, Tram. The story that I'm thinking about right now is the story of my sister, who is actually now 29 years old, and a single mom with 3 children. I'm thinking of her as she's going through just the spike in rent increase in the midst of pandemic, and she is a frontline worker. And just thinking about her and like the hardship that she had to go through over the last 11 months, and imagining what other people go through, because in the pandemic, in this pandemic, we know that everything just got worse for a lot of our communities. I'm thinking of stories like my sister and the many people who are sharing those stories, and hoping that, we pass this rent stabilization to at least bring the bare minimum where our families and communities can feel stable and can feel some sense of just certainty in their living condition, and not having to fear about where they're gonna live the next day, or having to fear, just debating between getting groceries or paying for their rent. And we know that is what our communities are going through right now. And I hope that this campaign will at least bring a glimpse of light to our community. Passing back to Cirien.
All right, and actually, MK, I think the next question might be yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm thinking about this Quilt Podcast, right? Quilt Podcast is a space where we're connecting community to different issues that are being worked on or folks are touching at the Capitol, right? And that, but why are we focused on St. Paul, right? There's a story behind that. There's a story behind why this, platform, right, that brings to light state level issues, right? Why we are actually focusing on something that is St. Paul specific. So I'd love for you to share more about that, right? So tell us more about, Keep St. Paul Home. Like, how did this start, right? And we'll pause there, and then I'll ask, follow-up questions. But yeah, what is this Keep St. Paul Home, right? And then what is its relationship to state level governance? Or how does state level governance inform, right? Why we have to do, like, why the strategy, right, that the campaign is choosing to enact, like why the strategy to put it on the ballot, right, and not assign our municipal governance, right, to take it on. Why?
I can take a stab at that if folks are okay with that. I can give a little bit of background around HENS, which is Housing Equity Now St. Paul. That's the name of the coalition that launched the Keep St. Paul Home campaign. And we came together with deep relationships about a year ago, actually. Organizations that are deeply rooted in the most racially and economically diverse neighborhoods of our city, like Frogtown, West Side, Southeast. And then we've also got some faith-based groups, some legal and policy folks. So just a really diverse group of folks who came together at first to help advance tenant protections at the city level, right? So that's a set of policies that was passed through City Hall with city council votes. It was challenging, right? It was challenging because you have to fit the people's energy into these channels that are not super welcoming to people's energy. And we found it really powerful to organize folks to show up in front of council members' houses to really take bold action and force them to realize that, like, renters are here, renters are listening. There's renter power in the city. There's solidarity with renters across the city for housing equity. And so we helped to advance those tenant protections. But we realized that as we were talking to renters about the protections, they were saying, just cause protections is great. A limit on security deposits is great. Having advance notice is great. But is there anything that protects me from getting economically evicted? Is there anything that protects me from, that retaliation, like Danielle said, right? Of if I ask for repairs, they can just evict me by raising the rent. And it was painful for us to say, no, there isn't. Like the set of tenant protections that we're all pushing for doesn't address that issue. So it became really clear to us as a coalition from hearing from the people that rent stabilization is what was needed. And like you asked, MK, it really has to do with state policy, because the only way to pass a rent stabilization policy in the state of Minnesota is through a ballot initiative. And to be honest, I think we prefer that, because it helps us build a true movement of people power. It's not getting 7 people to decide to vote on something. It's getting our entire city. It's collecting 10,000 signatures. It is, getting folks to share their stories across St. Paul. It is so much more powerful. So while I, don't like that the state has a preemption on rent stabilization policies, I think the fact that we can still pass it through a ballot initiative is what makes this campaign so powerful. Because we're not accountable to these, 7 people who are going to make the decision. We're accountable to the whole city of St. Paul, and specifically accountable to the low wealth BIPOC renters who are going to be voting on this. And so that's, incredibly powerful piece of the campaign.
Can I add something to that? I agree 100%. I think that we do prefer it that way. There's something extremely powerful about community members coming together and working towards something. And if you can do that, you will be successful. We've seen it. And one thing that has been really eye-opening to me is that when I get online, sometimes I'm talking and there are a lot of things that a lot of people don't agree with me on, and I have seen people who disagree with me on other issues say, listen to what Danielle is saying about this, though, this we agree upon, which feels very successful. It lets me know that where we're at is really at a place of representing all of us. And so it's just kind of like the proof is in the pudding. And it's been really encouraging to have support of people where sometimes we disagree, but this is something where we're agreeing upon.
I will also like to add that oftentimes when we're talking to folks on the ground within the communities, a lot of them don't even know their rights as a renter. And I feel like the whole goal with HENS and this campaign is to, not only pass this policy, but allowing folks to see the power that they have as renters. And a great way to do that is giving them access to knowledge, to their rights, giving them access to just data, giving them access to, this type of policy that we're working on. And I think a really great thing about HENS in this campaign is that, we do have an end goal, right? But also part of that is making sure that renters across St. Paul also know how powerful they are when they come together. I think a driving force of capitalism is driving us apart, not letting us talk to each other, not letting us be in community. And I think part of this work, at least for me as well, is going to be making sure that communities come together now more than ever in a way that is going to be like Danielle was saying, that village mentality where everyone can just know who they are, know who they live with, and get a lot of stuff done. So I think that's a really great part of the campaign as well that I love.
Oh, thank you so much, for the nourishment. And I wanted to give space to Jamila. Do you have any last words to offer before we move forward?
Yeah, I think for me, the most exciting part is just dismantling this belief that, having housing, like a roof over our head, is enough. As an immigrant myself, like a lot of my family members would tell me if I had a conversation about rent stabilization, and then they said, we should be grateful that we have roof over our head. We didn't have this before. So demanding for more is just, being ungrateful. With HENS, I feel like Brian was saying, giving the people the knowledge to actually see that housing is a basic human right, and asking to have a stable home that is clean, that is safe, that is surrounded by greenery is just a basic human right thing, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask it. We shouldn't feel like it is also within our it's not within our reach. So I'm just so grateful to be part of this campaign and to also just educate my community that asking for a bare minimum is not too much, and we should actually continue to ask more. And definitely like bringing more knowledge is like it's just my goal for now, to like bring my community to see that, it is our right to ask for what we deserve.
Thank you, y'all, so much. If it's the right thing to do, we have every right to do it, right? Thank you, Movement Generation and Indigenous, so many people, the multitude, right, who reminds us of that constantly. Thank you for being our sheroes and heroes, right, that are casting a vision, right, that should have always been, right? Thank you for creating a space and an invitation, right, for our people to dare to dream bigger, right? Thank you for pounding the pavement and sacrificing your weekends, right, to offer people opportunity and space to share their stories, right, to have an outlet, to reveal their concealed stories that always stand against and exposes the lies of our stock stories, right? The stories that we never want to hear again, right? And thank you so much for helping us, right, be jealous of the future that we deserve together, right? Housing is a human right, not a commodity. This is the direction, right? The pathway that I know I want to follow alongside with you, right? I am very lucky, right, and fortunate that I am in close proximity to you all, and that I am in relationship with you all. For the folks who are out there, who are the people who are looking for you, right? How do we find you, right? What does invitation look like right now, right? What are concrete ways that people can get involved in this movement, in this campaign?
I can take a jab at that. If folks ever want to get involved, donate, just keep up with us, you could definitely check out our website. It is housingequitystp.org. There are so many great tabs, especially under the Join Us tab. There are events, there's a volunteer form, and there are a whole list of other ways you can get involved. Some great plugs that we have are we have popular education events. Popular education involves the working class narrative. It centers the experiences and the stories of the working class people so that they can talk about the everyday struggles that they go through, and also come up with collective solutions to those struggles. We had one last night. It was really beautiful, and it's a great way for people to kind of learn about each other, especially during COVID times. We usually do them over Zoom, just for the time being. So we typically have those bi-weekly on Wednesdays, and we're hoping that we get more turnout with these. We're hoping that we can expand these to being other types of events, but those are really great ways to kind of learn more about your community members and learn about experiences outside of yours that could probably help you learn more about housing as a whole. We also have volunteer trainings on Wednesdays as well, bi-weekly. They don't align with the popular education events, but they are like they're a week after them. And those volunteer trainings kind of just allow space for people to know how to talk to other folks in their community about this policy and about this campaign. And it gives people the opportunity to collect signatures in their own neighborhoods. It gives people the opportunity to have their own event in their own neighborhoods. We're not really a campaign that's trying to gatekeep anything. We're trying to be a decentralized campaign that allows anyone to organize within their own communities, because that's how organizers should work. And gatekeeping resources is just not in our values or fundamental thinking of it. So if you ever want to get involved and organize within your own community, attend a popular education event, attend a volunteer training. The next volunteer training is going to be on the 14th of this month, so on Wednesday, and it's open. You just got to register, and it's free. And our next popular education event is on the 28th, on a Wednesday again at 5:30. The volunteer training is at 6:30 on Wednesday. So we have really great ways to plug in. We also have a couple signature collection sites this weekend. One is going to be at McAllister College, and it's going to be on Saturday from noon until 6. So we have those coming up. And if folks ever want to volunteer for those, again, a great way to do so is by coming to one of our volunteer trainings. And on Sunday, we are also going to be at Unidale Mall from noon to 6 again. So we're going to keep collecting these signatures until we reach our goal. And even then, we're not going to stop having these conversations because there's a movement happening right now in St. Paul, and we need to build off of it and make sure that everyone is involved and everyone is included. So those are just some great ways. I don't know if I missed anything. If my friends over at Hens, if I missed anything, please jump in. I feel like I'm good now.
That was comprehensive. So check that out, y'all. There's an overwhelming abundance, right, of invitations, of opportunities for you to get your reps in, right? Build the muscle for deep democracy and governance, y'all. Because if we ain't prepared to govern, we ain't prepared to win. So come join us at Como, Unidale Mall, and all them places, right? Love it. So the work that we do, let's bring Malcolm X into the room, right? Ancestor Malcolm X says, like, for those who prepare for, and I'm going to paraphrase because my brain is just, I got my brain right now. But the ones who prepare for, the ones who, man, I ain't gonna even, my bad. It's just something to the effect of like, yo, we got to do the work right now to prepare for the future that we want our babies, right, to continue. And so I'm going to pass it off to Cirien, you know what I mean, to for the next piece.
So we're coming up on the last 10 minutes or so of our discussion. So I want us to look to the future for a moment, and think about the stories that we can build with. What do you hope that rent stabilization can do for the next generation of people who call St. Paul home? And I know that we've touched on it, but I would love to be really explicit in naming what we want to see come from this.
I'll start. I'll jump in. One thing I think that I would like to see is for people to be able to have a choice, and to really be able to choose where they get to live their lives. Right now we have an illusion of choice, and people are being forced to make decisions in tight conditions, and that is stressful. And stress can be this silent, very deadly force that we sometimes don't talk about. And so I think people should have a choice of how they want to live their lives, where they want to live their lives, where they want to raise their families. I like to see people be able to make a choice.
I know we talked about this before, but rent stabilization is just a step, right? Step into a brighter future where people have more access to housing. And that's initially what I think I want the future to be, is everyone having access to housing, everyone having access to what they think housing looks like. I think we also have this weird narrative of what housing looks like, and not everyone follows it. And that's okay. But we should be willing to accept all types of housing. And I would love a future where everyone just has access to that, where there are no weird rules, processes, especially on stolen land. There should be no rules or, those type of colonial ideas of just like, this is what housing is, this is who has access to it, and this is what you need to go through in order to get it. I want that all gone. I want there to, not have to be, I don't want us to have to keep fighting for this in the next couple of years, right? Like, we shouldn't have to keep fighting for these type of issues. They should just be present. And so I'm hoping that, again, it's a stepping stone, and we think I often downplay myself of like, this is just a small thing, but, we're building a movement, and we're building renter power, working class power that will affect generations to come. that will allow them to grow here, generate great culture and wealth here, and that will keep a lot of communities put without the constant worry of where am I going to be displaced next? Where am I going to be moved to next? So I'm hoping that's what Rent Stabilization at least starts and gets the ball rolling on.
For me, I just wanted to see families kept together because I've had firsthand experience of like what it feels like to be separated from family because someone is being displaced out of the community they love because they just couldn't pay that $200 they, landlord just added to their rent. And I hope that this campaign is just like Brian said, is a milestone to keeping the families together, to making sure that families are not priced out of the communities they love, to make sure that families can actually have a stable home where they kind of start imagining, building home ownership. Because when they don't have to worry about the $200, the $300 that they think landlord would add to them, families can start to plan a future where they could, own a home and leave it to their babies. That's what I think. That's what I hope that this campaign will bring to our family. I'll pass it to Tram.
Thanks, everyone. Everyone's words are so powerful. It's like bringing me to tears. So I'll keep mine short. I hope that our campaign starts a movement so that in the future, the next generation doesn't have to fight for what they need. They fight for what they want.
Wonderful. And I think everybody had a chance to go. So just in the few minutes we have left, MK, was there anything you wanted to begin wrapping up with? Any other questions you wanted to ask?
No, I want to definitely, Danielle, do you want to share Malcolm X's quote? Because, every moment is a political education moment. So I can't leave our people hanging out there. So go ahead, Danielle.
Malcolm X said, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today."
That's right. And thank you for readying our soil, right? For a different reality. Thank you so much for doing that, y'all. Yeah. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your powerful organizing. Thank you for the resources and information that you've offered to us about how we can support this campaign, how we can get involved in this campaign, right? Thank you for all the different kinds of, it's almost like a fitness, you offered us a whole bunch of fitness studios, right? You damn moms and all this other stuff, practicing our reps. So I'm excited to practice my reps with you. You know what I mean? Show off my deep democracy muscles. And I hope others, right, are ready to get healthy, right, and join us. And so just want to make sure that if y'all want to get involved in the campaign, Gabby is going to drop a whole bunch of links, right, into the comment section of the Facebook Live conversation. And I would love to maybe close this off with a quote from my friend Jordan Flaherty, based in New Orleans, author of Floodlines and other really cool books, and writer for Al Jazeera. And then we're going to do some last words. We're going to bring Elder Pam into the room. And so Jordan Flaherty says that housing is a human right. There can be no fairness or justice in a society in which some live in homelessness or in the shadow of that risk, while others cannot even imagine it. So we'll end there, and we'll end with each of us saying one word, right, that sums up the spirit of this conversation today, right? Usually Elder Pam does the countdown. So I'm gonna channel Elder Pam in here. I'll do the countdown, 1, 2, 3, right? Whoever says that last word, we're gonna say that last word, and then we're gonna hang up on each other, okay? Okay. All right, y'all, so everybody off mute. And then I'm going to say people's names because I think in Zoom, the circle looks different for everybody, right? So one word, Danielle.
Inspired.
Thank you. Brian.
Enlightened.
Tram. Jamila. Jamila. Jamila, what's your last word to sum up the spirit of this conversation today?
We're going for a lunch in Treme.
Motivated.
Neighborhood. They can choose that light bulb.
And Tram, you were frozen earlier, so let me grab Cirien's and then let you get the last word, okay? So Cirien.
Future.
Tram.
People power.
Love it. Hyphenated. Okay, so everybody, so I'm gonna count. Elder Pam usually does a count for us. I'm gonna channel her spirit today. I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, and then we're gonna say people power, and then we're gonna hang up on each other. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Okay. 1, 2, 3. People power. Much love to y'all.